There are three main types of clinical trials that are worth understanding in order to understand the landscape of women's health interventions: double-blind randomized controlled trials, or RCTs, observational studies, and open-label studies. We use double-blind RCTs as the gold standard. It's the best type of clinical trial to run because essentially it means that when people enter the study, they don't know whether they're getting placebo or a real intervention, in our case, the Samphire headband and our neurostimulation technology. They don't know whether they're getting it real or not, and neither do their clinicians. And so we know that if we show effects in a double-blind randomized controlled trial, it will be evidence acknowledged by the EU, by the FDA, and by all authorities globally as the gold standard, showing that our neurostimulation works above placebo and has its own benefits and its own significant effects. However, these studies are not only very expensive and take a very long time to run, but they're also very restrictive, because in a double-blind RCT, you want to make sure that people getting the treatment and people who don't get the treatment are randomized. So you don't know who's getting which one, but it means that you need to get people who are relatively similar because you want to make sure that they're all getting the same shot at a benefit anyway. This means that there's a lot of inclusion and exclusion criteria in those trials, making these people look very similar. So for example, in a study with endometriosis, we'd be including women who all have endometriosis, but we might be excluding women who have endometriosis and adenomyosis, or endometriosis and PMDD, or endometriosis and any other condition. So even though we end up with a very clean sample, per se, of women with endometriosis, this might not be reflective of your own individual experience necessarily, because a lot of these women necessarily need to be excluded from double-blind randomized controlled trials, because that's what a gold standard is. That's why here at Samphire, we also do two other types of studies. One of the studies that we do is an open label study. An open label study means that everyone knows that they're getting Samphire headband or the Samphire neurostimulation technology. And so there is a potential there for there to be a placebo effect, but it means that no one is being refused treatment when we know it's safe and effective. This is a good standard of study to use when you're first exploring a new area where a technology could be beneficial. So for example, in our case, we got very good evidence that the Samphire headband was effective for migraines as well as brain fog. And so we wanted to study that in a clinical trial, and we started with an open label study in that case. And then the final type of study that is important to discuss is an observational study. An observational study means essentially you study something in the wild and look how real people interact with it. So that's a great way to study nuances and more complex conditions, which you can't capture in a regular double-blind RCT. So in the case of Samphire's neurostimulation, we now have thousands of users, and we've involved some of them in our post-market surveillance studies, which is one type of observational study. And a lot of them reported improvements in anxiety, irritability, brain fog, as well as migraines, things that we didn't know in the beginning that our headband would be able to help with so much. And when so many people reported these improvements, we said, okay, there's now enough signal from these observations of real people's lives who have all of the complexities that would regularly exclude them from clinical trials, that we can take this to the next level of evidence and potentially bring it to many more people as well. So when it comes to clinical evidence, it's really important to understand what each study can tell us and what it can't tell us. And for me, when it comes to understanding the breadth of any technology, we need to make sure that we do a combination of different types of clinical trial designs so that we're able to capture the diverse experiences of the way women live their lives and the types of solutions they need in order to live them better.